post it. All right, there we go.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Thank you for joining us today. This is our very first book group, me and Mr. Matt together. So we're working out our environment. We're working out the whole thing. So give us a little leeway as we move forward. It's the first time that we've done that. For those who don't know each of us, because some of you are coming from Sparta, some of you are coming from our Wayne Market Center. I'm Jane Trust Ryan. I'm the TL for the new Sparta KW that's opening up there in the next couple of weeks. We're already on the ground getting moving. And this is Matt Billheimer.
Yep, I am the team leader here at KW Prosperity in Wayne. I've been here over 2 years, actually next month. So it's been a fast and quick 2 years, but we're excited to bring this content to you today. This is the first time that I think both of us are teaching in the training room in, well, for Jane ever. For me in over a year. So I'm actually really excited to be back, in the training room and teaching. The one thing that we do want to say is that we will be doing these classes hybrid, in that the virtual option will always be available like we're doing right now. But if next Thursday or the next, I believe it's 5 or 6 Thursdays that we're doing this, if you want to come in, feel free to join us in the office as well. So we're gradually going back to a hybrid format.
Correct. So, if you want to reach out for any future training as well, whether it's Millionaire Real Estate Agent Book Club or whatever it is, just reach out and chances are it's going to be hybrid. Okay. So today we wanted to start by going over our really core values and core models. And we feel like in the pandemic that we've kind of not stepped away from what our core is, but we haven't been together and focused really, really strongly on what makes us KW and what models that make KW agents super, super successful. So for any of you who do not have this book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, I highly, highly suggest that you get it. It's very cheap. You can get it. You don't need one with the binding. This is the teacher edition, but you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it on Audible, so it can be around you 24/7 years. This is really the focus of Keller Williams and Keller Williams agent success. So we really want to bring ourselves back to basics and say, do we really know what it is that we are supposed to be doing to emulate what a very successful KW agent does? So that's what we're here, and that's why we're doing this class. So I'm going to let Matt kick it off at the very beginning.
Yeah, so thank you, Jane. And ultimately, what I'd love is for those of you who are plugged in right now in the chat box, if you could just put, who has read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent? If you could put yes or no, maybe you've never heard of it, maybe you have heard of it. And right now that's okay. There's, everyone on this call, some people have, so yes, so not yet, no. I know some people have. Joe behind me, I know has. Ray Aaron's, yes. I will tell you, the first time I ever read the book, it all kind of just went over my head. The first time I read it about 7 years ago. I've now read it, I want to say 6 or 7 times, and each time I read it, I pick up something new.
I have to tell you, my experience is just the opposite, because I also read it probably 6 years ago, which means I was in real estate 19 years already. And I said to myself, what the heck? Why haven't I read this before? It's like a freaking map. Okay, so those of you who are already experienced, you're going to be looking at these models and thought processes and being like, ay, why haven't I done this before? And those of you who are newer in the business and have never read the book, we really want you to focus on it and say, this is how it should be done, so that you can really live your life the way it should be lived, instead of running all over the place and fighting for success.
And ultimately, the reason why this book is so powerful is because, as Gary Keller always says, success leaves clues. So Gary Keller didn't write this book on his own and said, look, this is why this is the Bible of real estate. What he did was he and Jay Papasan went out to, I forget the exact number, but probably I want to say over 200 top agents in the field across the country, and interviewed them and asked them, what are you doing in your business that is making you successful and making you an industry leader? So then what he did was, between Gary and Jay and a couple other collaborators, they wrote this book where they basically broke it down into different chunks. And so that's what we're going to bring to you over the next, I believe it's 5 or 6 weeks. Today, we're really focusing on the first 100 pages of the book. And the first 100 pages is all about the mindset of the millionaire real estate agent. So in the weeks to follow, we'll go then into the economic model, the organizational model, lead gen model, so on and so forth. But today is really all about the mindset.
So let's start with the graph that's on page 37, those of you who have a book in front of you. This is kind of the key, one of the key things that you need to understand and you need to think about. So when he talks about a couple of things, if we're introducing this graph to you, he's saying to you, first of all, that success leaves clues. So when you look at somebody who's successful and who's doing a good job at anything, in any business, anywhere, and you see what they've done in the past, you can look and say, oh, I see how you went there. I see what they did, right? Because they're successful, and if they continue to be successful, well, they're doing some things over and over and over again. So success leaves clues. What that means is watch people around you who are successful, right? And do what they're doing to be successful. Because what they're doing, those successful people, is they are modeling for you what you need to do to be successful. So there is no shame in saying, oh, Bill and Ronnie do it this way, or Northrups, the Northrups are in this book, they do it this way, and following in their footsteps. Success leaves clues, and make sure that you're using those models that they're creating for you in order to follow in their footsteps and to also be successful. Professional, really successful people are professionals at modeling behavior. And so watch the people who are succeeding and do what they do, you're likely to succeed as well, as opposed to following somebody who is kind of winging it, right? So if you look at this graph, it's super important. What he's saying, and what I have been living and breathing through Pathway to 7 Million and through our lead gen process, is that you have to have a model, right? You need to take that model, which we're going to provide you in this book, right? We're going to take that model and get the model up and running, right? When you start to see success from the model as it is written, then you can start to be creative and start to adapt that model. So what the little graph on page 37 is showing you is that you need a strong foundation in order to build your business. And that foundation is the models that we're providing you. So I kind of lost my train of thought.
So for those of you who don't have the book in front of you, basically what the image looks like is if you had a pyramid, like a triangle, if you divided it in half, the base of the triangle, the base of the pyramid, which is the foundation, it's got the word models written in it. And then the top half, the top part of the pyramid, it says creativity. And so ultimately what this part is saying is that, and as we talk about success leaves clues, you need to have a strong base. Now the base has to be the models that we're going to be teaching you throughout this course. What a lot of people do though, and we do have a mix of people who are brand new, people who are top agents on this call today, a lot of people, regardless of where they are in their lifespan of a realtor, they focus too much on the creativity, because one of the things that Gary always says is success can sometimes be boring. And honestly, people try to integrate different things to be like, okay, well, this is boring. But it's the repetition, it's the models, it's the consistency that is ultimately going to drive success. Too often, new agents come in and they say, okay, well, let me try this, let me add this, flair.
Shiny objects.
Yes, and that sets them back because they're not following the model. And then when they approach us and say, well, why isn't my business exploding? Well, it's because you're not following the core models that are being taught.
Right. And there is a time and a place for creativity as you move further through the chapter.
Absolutely.
One of the things that they talk about is, people will say kind of self-fulfilling prophecies that they can't do it, or they don't have the same skill sets of other people, or they're not as good as other people. Well, what we truly believe is that you are as good as everybody else. If you use the models and you get past your fears, and we're going to talk about all of that in the coming half hour or so, you can certainly expand your own ability, right? And that if you're using these models, you will hit the top of your ability, right? And then once those models are set and up and running, you use that creativity to break through that ceiling. So go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, one thing I just want to do before we talk about the ceiling of achievement, to really just hammer this one point home, I just want to read a short little passage from page 44, because I think this is really important. And so what it says is, at the bottom of page 44, it says, more than 100 years elapsed between the time Mount Everest was identified as the highest point on Earth and the day the first person reached the top. Interestingly enough, a second group reached the summit just 1 year later. Today, dozens of people reach the top every year. So once the path was identified, the journey became more accessible to others. So as it says here, it is our intention that this book will have the same effect on you and your real estate career. So I wanted to bring that up because I think that that's an important point, in that no one was getting to the top of Mount Everest for the longest time. But then once one person did it and laid out the blueprint of how to do it, dozens of people are doing it now each year. And so it's the same applies to the MREA models, is that these aren't just things that were made up out of nowhere. People, these are real people that Gary and Jay interviewed, and these are real systems and models that they're plugging into their businesses.
Right.
And then to go back to kind of what Jane was saying, I want you to then take this part, is back on page 39, she was talking about the ceiling of achievement. And ultimately what that is identifying is that natural ability can only take us so far. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much that only one person can do in order till you reach that ceiling where you're like, look, maybe that's 10 million for some people. It could be 15 million, 7 million, but you're going to start to feel a little bit of a pain point because you're not able to get to that next point. Now, the cool thing about our office is that in our world at KW Prosperity and KW Integrity in Florida, we have people with that name. Is that?
I think that's the name. I'm not 100% sure.
KW Sparta. One of the cool things is we have people doing 100 million a year production, 40 million a year, 25 million a year. So once you reach that ceiling of achievement, as the book is saying, you need to learn the systems and models from the people who are doing it at a bigger level, because that's where you're going to learn from. That's where you're going to break through that ceiling until you reach the next ceiling.
Right, and that's where the creativity comes in. So after you've gotten to that point and you're saying, well, I can't go any further. So let's say I'm at $7 million a year in volume and he's at $15 million a year in volume. And we're saying to ourselves, like, I can't do it anymore in this model. That's where you add those creative things that the bigger agents who are doing 100 million will say, oh, well, try this and try that, right? And once you add that creativity in, then you're bringing up to the next level, to the next ceiling of achievement. And that could be, for an individual agent, that could be $25 million, right? And so we add that creativity in only after you've got the model totally up and functioning. And I cannot say that, I could say that 4,000 times in this meeting, that, it might be a little boring and it might be a little repetitive for you. But you know what? The repetitiveness is what is going to create the consistent business moving forward, because consistency is the key to the entire shebang. Right?
Absolutely. And I think when we're talking about consistency, the next part of this book, and you're going to hear this throughout the entire book, the three most important things of a millionaire real estate agent are the 3 L's. Mm-hmm. So you're going to hear the term, the 3 L's, a lot as we're going through this book. The 3 L's are listings, leads, and leverage. First and foremost, the number 1 L above all else that Gary says is the leads.
Right.
If you're not, and to go back to Jane's point, if you're not consistently lead generating every single day, you're going to have a business that's going to go up and down and up and down, because you're going to lead generate for a week and you're going to get some buyers or sellers. You're going to, service them and you're going to close 3 transactions. But if you're not doing lead gen every day for at least 1 to 2 hours, most likely, Joe, 2 hours, right? 2 hours. 2 hours a day, then you're going to reach that peak and then you're going to come back down to the bottom, and you're going to just always have that up and down flow.
When I talk about that up and down flow, I refer to it as the Porsche versus welfare model, right? Because you're working so hard and you've got all these buyers and sellers and they're getting ready to, woohoo, you have all of this money, right? Because these deals are closing. But because you've been focusing in your business and working with those customers and clients to get them to close, you haven't been focusing on your business. And without focusing on your business, as soon as those deals close, guess what? You're unemployed. because you don't have leads that are ready to go under contract moving forward. You have to start all over again generating those leads. So one of the statements that's made in this book that I just thought was so telling, and I know from years of recruiting, especially brand new agents into this business, that when you come into this business, you are taking 2 jobs, not 1 job, 2 jobs. You're selling real estate, but you also have to be a prospector and a lead generator. And he refers to in this book, which I think is great, is a physician. So you're a doctor, you come out of medical school, you're going to hang your shingle on the corner and be a general practitioner, right? How are you going to get people to walk in your door if you're a general practitioner standing on the street corner? So yes, you're a physician, and yes, you went to 12 years, 14 years of school in order to be a physician. That doesn't guarantee and clients and or patients to walk in your door. So when agents come into this business, I can't tell you how many times I've heard it. Why do you want to be a real estate agent? Oh, I love houses. Oh, I love houses. I watch HGTV and TLC, and it's like my favorite thing in the world. Well, that's great. Where are you going to get your customers and clients from? And those agents are out of the business within the first 4 months because they thought the customers and clients were going to fall from the sky and everybody was going to want to buy houses from them, right? They didn't realize that their primary job is not actually selling houses. Their primary job is finding the customers and clients who may or may not buy a house. And I say may not because if you treat those people well, they will refer you to people who will buy a house, right? And that, when we look at our 3 L's, leads, it comes first for a reason, because there are no listings and there's no need for leverage if you don't have leads, right? So you need to start and finish your day thinking about where tomorrow's leads are coming from. That's primary in any world, in any business that you're starting on your own. Right?
And also just to expand on that, it does not, prospecting means a lot of different things. And we'll get into that when we talk about the lead gen model, probably next week or the week after, which is ultimately that prospecting, it could be cold calls, it could be door knocking, it could be doing open houses, it could be like, there's a lot of social media, there's a lot of different avenues to go down, and we'll touch on that in future weeks. But I do think that sometimes when people think prospecting, they naturally gravitate and think about cold calling. And while that is definitely a good option and a very strong option, it's not the only option.
Correct. And you will find ways where you become super comfortable, first of all, prospecting. Secondly, where you feel, because clearly when you're doing a prospecting, you're going to be recording where all these leads are coming from, right? Because that's going to be part of our process. But you'll be able to look back over a 6-month period and say, you know what? Not only do I hate cold calling, but I never get any business from that. But through my door knocking or through my communications with whatever group it is, I get lots of business from that. So as we look at our prospecting over time and look at the lead generation that we create, we will be able to nail down for you where your best ROI is, return on investment. And the investment at this point in time is going to be your time, right? So don't get scared off by the concept of lead generation or prospecting, because there's a niche for everybody. And when you find it, you're not going to Porsche versus welfare, because you're going to have built good habits so that it's going to be consistent, so that it's everyday Porsche day, or maybe not Porsche, let's say Lincoln, kind of more mellow across the middle, right? So that your business is not, and your life is not like that. And it leads to less life, for sure.
When we're looking at the second L, so the second L is listings. So leads is number 1, number 2 is listings. And ultimately, it says in the book, page 41, listings are the high leverage, maximum earning opportunity in our industry. And the big thing with that is, the one thing that Gary found in research is that one listing properly marketed should generate enough to produce a minimum of 1 closed buyer. So a highly successful business will be one that's pretty balanced, where if you sell 15 listings a year, you're also going to have 15 buyers as well, because each listing should yield a minimum of 1 buyer.
So the most effective real estate agents that you see, the big producers, tend to be very big listing agents. There's lots of reasons for that. One that he touches on here a little bit, and we'll look at it further as we go on into this class. But one is that listings take you less time.
Yes.
You can potentially, big listing agents can list 15, 20 houses a month, 15, 20 houses a month that we're listing, that's great, right? But you could not have 15 buyers in a car in any month and expect them to go under contract and you to be able to be functioning afterwards, right? So if you focus more on listings, you are focusing your time better to generate more business for you.
Well,
and in addition to that, marketing opportunities for you. So that will bring you future business. So you have the opportunity for signage, for advertising, for all that kind of stuff. When you're working with a buyer, yes, you get the with the buyer and you can send out I brought the buyer thing, right? But it's not as prolific as you have on the list side. So money in marketing for the listing is money in marketing for you. Yeah. So listing agents tend to be more productive in terms of per hour productivity than a buyer's agent.
Yeah, I believe to take that a step further, and Joe, you can maybe back me up on this part. We did an event right before COVID with the top agent, Jeff Glover, with Keller Williams. He's from Michigan, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So Jeff Glover, we did an exercise where he said, write down all of the tasks of a listing agent and all the tasks you do as a buyer's agent. And I want to send a listing side.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
The work required for buyers, not only the list on one side took up almost the whole page.
Yeah.
We also broke it down into hours.
Yeah.
We broke it down that you spent a minimum of 40, 60 hours working with a buyer to get them to the closing table. And we're working 15 to 18 hours with a seller. That's just remarkable. It's 3 times the time and 3 times less the aggravation.
And with that being said, like as a newer agent, you're taking business where you can get it. But the goal is that as you're developing, as you're lead generating, the more you can focus on listings, the more dollar producing, time you're going to have, the more, the more time you will have at the end of the day. And that's a big piece.
And I want to add in here, working with listings is a skill, right? And it's
Beautiful, thank you.
that our coaching program can help you with, right? You need to get comfortable working with listings. Right now, in this market, anybody who has a listing, that's guaranteed you're going to be paid, right? Because that's what this market is right now. It's such a heavy seller's market. I do feel in my gut as a almost 25-year-old realtor in the world that that's coming in for a shift, right? It is coming in for a shift. So it's going to be a little bit easier in the future working with buyers and a little bit more difficult working with sellers. Ideally, the market is a balanced market at a 6-month inventory rate, in which case, nobody has such a bigger advantage over anybody else. And at that point, honestly, I think it's easier to work with both buyers and sellers. So we're going to work with you on both.
So then the third L of the 3 L's, we have leads, we have listings, and the last piece is leverage. So I don't want to go too much into leverage right now because that's definitely something more for the organizational model. But when we were talking before about reaching your ceiling of achievement, a lot of that sometimes means you just don't have enough hours in the day. And so you need that leverage piece from an admin and then a buyer's agent down the road to ultimately get to that next hurdle.
Somebody that's going to help hurdle you up past where you are now. It's very important. And the only thing I want to touch on that is, even if you're at that point and you're saying you can't afford it, you really need to look at these models in the book, because saying you can't afford it, making yourself be able to afford it, using the economic model that the book sets up to you so that you can afford it will, your business is going to be, I'm going to say extrapolate, but that's the wrong word, exponentially bigger than the cost of the leverage point, right? So let's make sure that you focus on that when the time comes.
So I guess now we can kind of move forward. So we went through the 3 L's. Next piece is really, it's the mindset piece, and we'll go through the 6, they're called 6 myth understandings.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yep. So page 49 is where I'm at right now in the book. So one of the things that Gary writes is that you have to have the right mindset in order to be a millionaire real estate agent. And he encountered that there were a lot of common myths about the industry and things that people have a preconceived notion about, but that aren't actually true, or that it prevents them from getting to the heights that they want to get to. So the first myth understanding, the myth, as Gary writes, is people say, I can't do it. And the truth is, he writes here, until you try, you can't possibly know what can or can't do. And I will say, I meet with a lot of people who think, well, Bill and Ron or Tressa or Pat, they do 20 million, 40 million, 100 million, and they built this team, like, I can't do it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to remove that from your vocabulary. Because as Gary writes here, unless you absolutely know your capabilities and limitations, why do you entertain this kind of inner dialogue?
Right. You don't know until you try something. And imagine when you try something and you have success, how you feel about that, right? And one of the things I want to bring you back here to what we were talking about earlier, cold calling, right? Or let's not even talk cold, let's talk warm calling. Sometimes the problem isn't even the doing it and what you're going to say, it's getting over yourself to do it, right? So sometimes yourself is your biggest barrier. And so you have to rip that apart and you have to make yourself do it so that once you see success, that barrier is then gone and it's so much easier to move forward. So as they write here that high achievers have long since discovered on page 51, that once you try and achieve one thing that you thought might not be possible, it becomes easier and easier for you to see the impossible as something to achieve, right?
And with that, a lot of it comes about goal setting in a little bit, but it's about chunking down your goals into manageable pieces. And so do you want to talk real quick about the 4-minute mile? So I think that's a good example.
So the 4-minute mile is another, I was going to talk about this with our big models, but we can talk about it now, right? So when it was considered that nobody could run a 4-minute mile, right? And that was like standard, nobody could run a 4-minute mile. Don't ask me the dates and who the Olympians and their names were because I can't tell you.
Somewhere in England though, right?
Some guy in England who wanted to run the 4-minute mile, right? And he couldn't run the 4-minute mile and he was like the biggest Olympian out there. So they decided that it was not possible to run the 4-minute mile, right? So here you have this little researcher in a university in England who has a 30-minute lunch period every day. And he decides he wants to see if you can beat the 4-minute mile. So what does he do? Every day he tries to do a 1-minute quarter mile. And he keeps doing a 1-minute quarter mile or trying to get to the 1-minute quarter mile, 2 minutes off. 1-minute quarter mile, 2 minutes off. This man, working at his lunchtime, minutes a day, then ran the first sub 4-minute mile, right? Because he chunked it down into pieces that he knew he could do, and he ran 3 minutes per second for sub 4-minute mile. The Olympian, guess how long it took him to do it? 2 months. Something that he had said never ever be done, that everybody decided could never ever be done. 2 months later, after the first guy did it, he was able to achieve it. So you need to look at that in different ways. The first thing you need to look at is, somebody else can do it, well, I can certainly do it, right? And then he said to himself, how did he do it? And what he did is he took the model of the researcher working in England and said, maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I don't need to run, bat hell for a full 4 minutes for the whole mile. Maybe what I need to get faster at the quarter mile, right? And he followed that path, followed the model, and was able to break through what previously in his brain was impossible, right? In the world's brain was impossible. So that's kind of where we're going.
Thank you, Maria. His name was Roger Bannister.
Oh, Roger Bannister, thank you. But he was the guy in England, Roger Bannister, right? I think so. Okay, so it brings us to the second myth understanding, where it can't be done in my market. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, we can't do that here. That won't work here, right? If they're doing it in any market, anywhere, across the world, it can be done in your market, right? And sometimes when you're looking for things that are new and things that are engaging and things that are alternative to what you're seeing in your world right now, you need to not look in your market. You need to look in other markets and how they're doing things in other markets and be the first person to bring that thought or that idea into your market, right? So when they're saying it can't be done here, if it's being done anywhere else, it can certainly be done here, but you can't look here for the answers. You need to look somewhere else to get those answers on how you can do it or how you can break into something.
Well, I think this also, it highlights, Keller Williams does 2 annual events each year, one called Mega Camp and one called Family Reunion. Mega Camp is coming up, I want to say the last week of August. It'll still be virtual, so this is a quick plug for that, in that there's people all across the country who are teaching classes on different things.
Okay.
We're going, sorry, there was a weird feedback around, but you're good, Christina. But so where I was going with that is, I remember seeing someone out in Colorado who does this really good thing in her community where she like hands stuff. It's a small town.
Yeah.
Like she basically hands like it was like chocolate or something. It was just something at like a grocery store. I don't know. But anyways, it was a really cool idea. And the thing is that, so I forget, somebody that I was with was like, oh, that wouldn't work here because it's not as like, the schools are further apart. It's not as like, it was a small town. But the thing is, it's not about that. It's about just listening to what other people are doing and then implementing it into your world and making it work for you. And maybe it won't work, but until you try it, you won't know.
You won't know. Exactly. So the fourth common understanding, it's too written. I'm sorry.
We did
3.
Did we?
I thought we did. Wait.
I think number 3 is it would take too much time and effort.
Go ahead.
I would lose my freedom.
Go.
The truth
I'm
is,
jumping.
yeah. So the myth is it would take too much time and effort. I would lose my freedom. The truth is time and effort are not the deciding factors of success. So it's really just about fine tuning the system, gaining the right leverage in your business.
Mm-hmm.
So as Gary read, the key to success at this point is not to apply more time or effort to the equation, but to think of time and effort differently.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and again, that's where I believe we're doing a time management class and a math. That's where it's all about time blocking your schedule. Because I hear this a lot from people, there's not enough time in the day.
Right.
And it probably means you don't have structure. You're not putting time on your morning schedule. You're not doing lead follow-up. You're not scheduling the afternoon for appointments. Like you don't have a structure to your day.
Mm-hmm. Because you're not following a model, right? Yeah. When we give you the model, you'll have the structure. So the next one, which apparently I realized, is number 4, and it's too risky, I'll lose money, right? The reality is risk is direct proportion to how well you hold your incremental costs accountable for producing incremental results. So there's 2 things here I want to talk about. First, as we move forward and we talk about the economic model and how you're going to divide your checks in, you should always have money to spend on your business, right? It's super important that you always have that money to spend on your business. So that's a given when talking about this. So what he's like, oh, it's going to cost me too much money, I can't do that. Well, let's talk about, you're going to do, let's say, a marketing campaign to a farm over the cost of the year, and you want to kick it off, right? So you have to start seeing results for that in order for you to understand if it's good. What I talk, which I really think is a good thing within anybody's own financial life, is the green light model, yes. Right? So you are going to say, I'm going to this money to do X, and you get the light green, and the green is out there, and you're spending the money. You need to then go to, you need to say, oh, caution, I continue to spend this money, but I need results from it. And then if you're not seeing results, red light, it goes back to that very young childhood game, like green light. Yes, I have the money. Yes, I think this is what we should be doing. Give it a green light, put the money towards it. But then you go into caution mode and you say, I need to watch this to make sure I'm getting incremental results, the amount of money I have spent. And if you're not, boom, goes red light and you stop spending money on it, okay? So we're going to be talking about that kind of philosophy as we dig deeper into the economic model. But understand, if you're organizing your monies correctly, you will have the money to spend on your business all the time. And then you have to monitor that money that you're spending on your business to make sure it's giving you results. Because if you're not, like we referred to earlier in this discussion, if you're not looking to see where your leads are coming from, then you don't know. And so you could be spending money on stuff that is creating any ROI for you. So we're gonna make sure that you stay on top of that and play like green light with all of your finances, so you will always need to do what you need to do.
And I would also just say to that, I feel like, especially in today's day and age, there's all these shiny objects that look so good, whether it's do this on social media, pay this or do that, do this. And sometimes you're always chasing something that just doesn't pan out. And to Jane's point, and they talk a lot about this, the red light, green light is a game that you definitely have to play with all of your financials, because you do not want to be in a situation where you're spending all this money and not getting the return on your investment.
Right.
From different people I've talked to, on average, you want to have, well, and this is from what I've heard, 10 times your return on investment for what you're spending. That's ideal. Obviously, sometimes it'll be lower, but that is an ideal number to look at from a return on your investment. Okay, number 5, and this is actually one of my favorites because I hear this all the time. The number 5, or the 5th myth understanding, the myth is my clients will only work with me, only I can deliver quality service. The truth, as it says, your clients aren't loyal to you, they're loyal to the standards you represent. Now, I think this one's really important, especially as you grow your business. Because once you reach that first ceiling of achievement that we were talking about, and you need to maybe hire an admin, have buyer's agents, different things, people sometimes are reluctant to do that because they feel that their clients are buying their services. They're buying, like they're connecting with the relationship that they're having with just that agent. But the reality is, it's the standards that people are buying into, or that they're liking about you. And it could be, everyone has a different set of standards. And what I will say is that's important for you to understand about your business, is know what your core values are for you and your business, and make sure that any admin you hire, any buyer's agents you're working with, they align with those core values. If you're somebody that, something simple, you might respond to all emails within 12 hours, then you need to make sure that whoever is your admin has that same level of service and same level of standard. So I think that this is one of the most common things that I hear, is just that when people are reluctant to grow their businesses, it's purely that, well, no one does it like I can do it, or and it's not that people are looking at it. It's looking at your standards and what they're getting and receiving from you.
And it goes back to before, that success leaves evidence behind it, right? So you're doing something right. What is it you're doing? You can teach what you're doing to the people to emulate you within your own organization.
Well, and I like what it says here. It says systems are simply roadmaps, instructions that allow these standards to be repeated and duplicated easily. It's not a system if it can't be duplicated and if it can't be repeated. So anything that you're doing, and one thing that we'll talk about later in the organizational model, is writing down a list that you're doing, almost like a handbook, so that way as you grow, it can happen. And you were away for 2 weeks or whatever.
Like vacation happened.
Wow. Vacation,
I love that. Something positive happens. Okay, so let's go on to our 6th misunderstanding. I love this. I love the example that he gave. So it's having a goal and not fully realizing it is a negative thing. And the truth is, having a goal and not trying to achieve it is a negative. And the example that he put in the book was a picture that his parents had on the wall, and it was a list of dates and words. So 1832, failed in business, bankruptcy. 1832, defeated for legislator. 1834, failed in business, bankruptcy. 1835, fiance died. 1836, nervous breakdown. 1838, defeated in election. 1843, defeated for U.S. Congress. 1848, defeated for U.S. Congress. 1855, defeated for U.S. Congress. 1856, defeated for Vice President. 1858, defeated for U.S. Senate. 1860, elected President of the United States. Who was that? Anybody have any idea who lived that glorious life? Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
You got it, Abraham Lincoln. That's failing forward, right? You have to fail forward. There is no such thing as failure if you learn something from it, right? So the fiance dying, I don't know, and the nervous around that, I don't know, right? But he continued to try to reach his goal. And every time he tried to reach his goal, he didn't see it as failure, but rather a growth opportunity, right? So part of our, and we're going to get to it in a second, the big and setting your goals, you have to have like huge goals, like really big. You need to think big, right? And aim high, right?
Yep.
So in order to get there, you have to expect that you're not going to have this smooth sailing, that there are going to be bumps in the road, and that there's going to be failure. And you know what? That's okay, because you always learn something when something doesn't go right. Okay.
Well, and I love what they write here. It says too many people live their lives under mistaken success is a matter of avoiding failure.
Yeah.
The problem with that approach to living is that when you actively avoid failure, you tend to avoid challenges as well. Success is not about failure. Failure is about avoiding failure. Success is about trying. And that goes back to when we're talking about leads and lead generation. You got to try different things. You can't say, oh, I'm not going to cold call. I can't do it. I've tried it. I don't love it, but I get results from it sometimes. But there's different things. Until you try it, you don't know whether you're going to fail at it or get the results that you want.
There are people on this Zoom with us right now that were cold calls from me, right? That's why they're here, because I picked up the phone and I called them, right? That's not an easy thing to do, but you learn. Do you think people hung up on me? Do you think people have told me to remove me from your list? Stop calling me? Absolutely, right? But there's success because there's people here on this call. So you learn from all those people. It builds strength. It builds a thicker skin on you, and you move on. So you can't look at, if I don't achieve my goal, then I'm a failure. No. What did you learn on the process to achieving that goal? And what could you get at the end of it? Way past what you could have if you set your goal too low, right?
So what we want to do now is we want to move ahead a little bit to page 71, which is now the 9 ways the millionaire real estate agent thinks. So we just finished talking about the common misunderstandings that people encounter, but now we're going to talk about the 9 ways the millionaire real estate agent thinks. So the first 2 are the 2 foundational ones, the 2 most important, which is think powered by a big why and think big goals and big models. The first one, which is think powered by a big why, number 1, I'd recommend reading the One Thing book, which is also written by Gary Keller. But ultimately, Gary writes, we've discovered that one thing all high achievers have in common is they're working for a big why. The big why is about having a purpose, a mission, or a need that in turn gives you focus. High achievers always have a big why powering their actions. And one of the best examples, and I love this example because I see it in myself when this happens, is before you go on a vacation. So I'm sure everyone on this call has been on a vacation at some point or another. The day before vacation, I'm sure you're probably the most productive that you've ever been because you're focusing on just the most important things that have to get done before vacation. It could be, whatever it might be, but you are, tying up all loose ends at work, but there's certain things that you may not accomplish, but you know what your top 20% things are, the 20% of your activities that need to get done will get done. And so that's ultimately what a big why is. What is the thing that's pushing you, motivating you, and giving you that mission and that purpose? And it's really critical. I know it doesn't sound that important necessarily because it sounds something simple, or maybe it does sound important, yet a lot of people don't ever actually figure out what their big why is.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, it could be their children, it could be their family, it could be, it's so many different things to so many different people,
Right.
But you need the big why in order to, when you wake up on those days and you don't want to lead generate or you don't want to do something, it's what's pushing you to say, okay, yes, I'm going to go over this hurdle and I'm going to keep doing it.
Right. So the big why then brings you into big goals and big models, right? So now you have this huge goal out there, this big why, and you're like, why you want to do this? So let's say you want to have, steady income in retirement that's passive income coming from somewhere else, not your retirement funds that you've been saving for, right? So passive income. So that's your big why. So now you need to look at it and say, what are my goals? How am I going to get there? How am I going to get, step by step to where I am? So what they talk about here with big goals and big models is that the bigger the goal you have, means that the bigger the models you're going to build. And one of the things that they talk about is when they were building KW itself, where he had 2 offices, and he changed the phone, the way they answered the phone in one of the offices to Keller Williams National Office, right? So they started calling it the National Office. And in creating that habits, they started to see things grow from that. And what they did when they had this plan to be a worldwide organization, which they are, and when they were setting up to reach that really ridiculous, bodacious goal for a guy with 2 little offices in Texas, he started putting those systems in place to get him to that place. And they were big systems. There are systems in place now, at least at the time of writing this book, where he's servicing thousands and thousands of agents on the same systems that he put in place early on. So you need to start thinking about your habits and making sure that the habits that you're getting yourself into are going to help you to reach your goal. When you look, there's one graph here on page 80 that I love. And it basically is a box with a trajectory going across. So start creating, let's say, your lead gen habits. If you only make $2.5 million a year, well, that might be, I'm just pulling numbers out of my head, let's say 7 deals or transactions a year to sell $2.5 million. Well, if you need 7 people, you need less than 1 person a month. Well, how many people do you need to talk to get less than 1 person to buy a house a month, right? But if you start your habits, I'm going to talk to 20 customers a day, I'm going to make 25 contacts a day, then you're creating a habit for yourself for possibly generating 10 or 15 or 20 customers or clients a month, right? So you're working the habits that are bigger than your goal, right? So that when you hit your goal and you want to go on to the next goal, you don't have to reinvent the wheel for yourself. And they use an example here of why I'm talking about runners today. I don't know.
It's all through this book.
But I'm back because I am clearly not a runner, right? But we're back to where they're talking about a marathon. And how many people, when they finish the marathon, it's their first marathon, you know, and a year ago they were sitting on the couch. And there is that book, From Couch to 5K. Well, the reality is, if you decide you want to run a marathon, the marathon is the long goal. That's 26.2 miles. Guess what halfway is? Halfway is a half marathon, 13.1 miles. If you were planning and building your running schedule, this weekend I'm going to run 2 miles, next weekend 4 miles, next weekend 6 miles. If you were building that to run a half marathon a year from now, you would get to the half marathon a year from now, right? But if you set your habits to run the 26.2, a marathon a year from now, when do you hit the half marathon? 6 months in, right? So if you're creating these goals and habits that are really big, those big goals pull you through smaller ones, right? So if you're sitting on your couch saying, maybe I'll be a runner, maybe I'll get this Couch to 5K book, and I'm going to set myself as a goal to run a marathon, well, you can celebrate running a half marathon halfway through your process, right? Because you built the habits for the bigger goal, and the smaller, exciting goals get pulled along with it.
And so I would just ask yourself, do you have the habits of a $5 million producer or an $80 million producer?
Right.
And if you don't know the answer to that, then that's a different content. And that's where we're going to really be diving into some of those in future weeks.
Right. And all the models and habits that we're going to give you, obviously the foundations that then later on you get to add the creativity to break through the ceilings of achievements, right? But all the models that we give you, those are millionaire real estate models. Those are $80 million a year models, right? There's no reason why you can't put them in place and use those models to pull you through your goals.
So those were the 2 foundational areas where the mindset of a millionaire real estate agent. The next ones are important, but they're not the foundational ones.
Right.
The next one, number 3 on page 81, is think possibilities. I'm not going to go too deep into this one, only because it's ultimately, I'd highlighted this one thing, and I think this kind of sums it up. Ask yourself this question. When presented with a challenge, do you first think of the ways you could succeed or the ways you could fail? And so this is saying you want to always have that thinking of how you're going to succeed and being solution-based rather than being problem-based or challenge-based. The mindset of a millionaire real estate agent is someone who is always solution-based, because you're going to be facing challenges all the time.
Right.
And so you have to have that ability to focus on, okay, what are the ways that I can make this a success versus, okay, what are the ways this is going to fail?
Mhm.
You have to look at the positive side
positive.
rather than the negative.
And that's not to not see the bumps, those
Correct.
failures are gonna come, you have to recognize them because they can throw you off course, but you have to lean towards the positive and see the possibilities.
You have to be able to anticipate.
Right, anticipate.
Exactly.
Right, the next one is think action, and I love this. If you want to do something, guess what? You have to do something in order to get there. So many agents and people in general say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and they spend tons of time on the planning of it and then never execute it. You have to think action. You have to build your systems and your models, and you have to do it in order to succeed. So possibility thinking must be followed by action for those possibilities to be fully realized. You can say to yourself, yes, I'm going to do lead gen. Yes, I want to do it. If you don't show up and actually do it, you don't see any success. So you have to think action and put those models in place.
So the fifth one, which I think is important as well, they're all important,
Yeah.
but I like this one, it's think without fear. And I think a lot of times, and again, this kind of goes back to the think possibilities, in that you can't look at something from a fear-based mindset, because I think a lot of times, and I see this in our world a lot, where people almost get, or agents can almost have that analysis paralysis type mindset where it's like, well, I need to know everything about everything or anything until I feel comfortable actually going out and doing. And the reality is you need to just do and you need to try. As Gary writes on page 86, if you never quit trying, you've never really failed. But if you don't even try, then you're not even getting the at-bat or the opportunity to even know if you will succeed or won't succeed.
Right. Next one is think progress. And they give such a great example in here where there's a ceramics teacher, and the ceramics teacher splits the class in half. And she says, you're going to get 1 grade at the end of the semester. This half of the class over here, you are to make 1 pot. And the pot has to be absolutely perfect. And then you will be graded on that pot, right? The other half of the class, she says, you're going to be graded on the weight of how many pots you could create over the course of the entire semester, right? So the ones on the left, who are getting graded on the 1 pot, they spent half of the semester designing the pot, and the second half of the semester tweaking it and trying to get it perfect, right? Well, the kids over here, they were throwing pots 2, 3, 4 a day, right? Because the maximum number of pots that they could get out, they succeeded, they got a better grade. Well, what happened in the end? Whose pot was actually better? Do you think it was the one who planned it and only spent time doing 1? Or the kids there and said, I made 50 pots, and pot number 1 through 10, they're okay. But pot number 20 and 30, well, they were really good pots. And by the end, pot number 50 was a beautiful, beautiful pot, and nicer than the other ones, right? That spent the whole semester on them. Well, why is that? Because practice makes perfect, right? So you need to look at progress and say, okay, I made 10 phone calls today. I only got 1 lead from it, but that's okay. Tomorrow, if I make 10 phone calls, maybe I'll get 2 leads from it, right? It takes time for you to mature your process, and progress will get you there eventually, but you have to let the process happen, right? You have to grow through what you're doing to get where you need to be.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that kind of leads into the next one, which is number 7 on page 89, which is think competitively and strategically. And ultimately, this is kind of, we talked about this before, thinking outside of the box, and also, first following the models, but then kind of sprinkling in the creativity. In this example, Gary uses, he says, look, we've all probably played Monopoly or Scrabble or Risk, or, think of any board game that you've played at some point in your life. And all of a sudden you almost transform into this, he writes here with Risk, he said his son transforms into Napoleon, trying to be, the conqueror of the world. And so why don't we apply that to our everyday life, in that, the people who are strategic thinkers not only find tremendous success, but they also have the power to reshape their respective professions. And we talked about that before, in just, we were talking about just people with different ideas and just thinking outside of the box, and those are the people that are going to ultimately transform the industry.
Right in the middle of page 91, there's something here that says low achiever, high achiever, where I literally was laughing out loud, thinking of Bill and Ronnie. So for those of you who know me over time, Bill and Ronnie and I have worked together for a decade, right? And the middle of the page, the low achiever says, can we do that? Right? Yep. The high achiever looks at me in my office across my desk and says, why? Did somebody say we couldn't do it? Can I tell you how many times they're saying to me, who said we can't do it? Why can't we do it? Right? What's wrong with it?
What's the expression? Ask for forgiveness later.
Yes, ask for forgiveness, right? It made me laugh because that's the way they think. Now, you have to be super cautious in this strategic thinking because what it does not allow is for poor ethics or for illegal things. But the concept of who said I can't do it or why can't I do it? Why, just because somebody else hasn't done it doesn't mean I can't do it, right? And that's what the high achiever thinks about. And that's how they get where they need to be. I can't tell you how many times those boys pushed the envelope in my little world. They pushed it many, many times because they're big, big thinkers. And you need to be the same way. Just because somebody's not doing it doesn't mean it can't be done.
And then the next one, number 8 on page 92 is think standards. And we talked about that before when we were talking about the myth understandings, and ultimately people are they're attracted to you for your standards and your level of service. So one question I always ask people, and whether brand new, whether in the business forever, is what is your unique value proposition that you bring to your clients? And if you don't know the answer to that question, that's something you really need to figure out the answer to, because that's your elevator pitch. That's your, in some sense, well, why should I work with you? What makes you unique, and what is your unique value proposition and set of standards that you ultimately bring to the table?
Right. And then the final one is really, I think, at the heart of everybody, it's think service, right? I think anybody who gets into the real estate business is a people pleaser. It's very rare that somebody's going to be in this business who's not a people pleaser. We are in this business to provide a service to other people. Here at KW, we call our leadership team servant leaders. Yep. We are here to provide a service to you. And I believe that at the heart of every real estate agent, especially high producing one, that is their goal, is that they want to provide a service to somebody, right? So you need to think service. What am I doing now, and how is service to somebody? Or how can I create a situation where it's a better, higher level of service to the customer and client? And I think that from all of these things that we've done here, that's probably the easiest one for all of us, because that's natural for us.
Page 95, for those who have the book, does have a good list of the top 10 service areas for your buyer value proposition and top 10 service areas for your buyer value proposition.
Okay.
So
seller buyer.
Or seller and buyer. So that's on page 95. But so those are the 9 ways an MREA thinks. And that really takes us up to page 100, which was where we really wanted to get through that first part, which is the mindset of a millionaire real estate agent. Next week, we'll be diving into the economic model. So when Jane was talking before, look, when you have a big goal and if you know a number of where you want to get to, it's breaking that down and saying, okay, what percentage of that is buyer-based, seller-based, what's your average price point, what's your average commission percentage, and be able to work backwards into your goals. And so that's what we're going to look at next week.
Correct. So I know we went over a lot today, and a lot of today's content is really it's really ethereal. It's really just mindset, right? It's not hardcore. This is the facts. This is the way the model works. This is what you need to do. But it's super important, because if your head isn't in the right space to make this happen, then it won't happen. So what we'd like you to do prior to next week is obviously read through the economic model. We want you to have an idea of what we're talking about so we can have some discussion back and forth. But we also want you to read through again these first 100 pages and make sure that your mind is in the right headspace and that you're prepared to take on these models and to execute them. We have like 2 minutes left. I know we ran a lot of talking in this hour. Did anybody have any questions for us about that piece? No?
Good. And for those of you, page 129 is where the economic model starts. So if you do have a book, 129 is where the economic model begins.
Perfect.
Good.
All right,
Awesome.
everybody. We'll see you
So
soon.
I just had a question for next
Okay.
class. So for next class, you want us to read the first 100 pages or from 129 onwards?
I would read the first 100 pages since that's what we just went over. And then also, if you do have time to read page 129 to about, it's kind of a short section, but we'll also go into
Yeah,
the,
so the economic model, Nancy.
Yeah.
That's what we're hitting next time.
Yep.
The economic
All
model.
right. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you guys.
Okay, be good, everybody. We'll
See
see
you
you.
next
Stay
week.
dry out there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.